the last video I talked about how important infrastructure as code was, and I also mentioned SST, but I actually haven't shown you any examples how to even start with SST or even implement it. So in this video, I want to just take you through the basics of just first how to start with SST, mainly walking through just the basics of an AWS account, set up the CLI, and then essentially how you can start your first basic SST deployment and how easy it is. So let's get into it. So let's just get first. So one thing to note, I want to use a monorepo in this example. You don't always need to use a monorepo, but I think using a monorepo will help cover a basic repo with a monorepo, so it has the benefits of both. I'm going to be using shadcn in this example. I'll be using their monorepo CLI to easily start it up. This has a good approach, especially if you want to use a dashboard in the front end and you want to make the same components. You can share them between both using the package system, and then you can have different apps for it. You will notice one thing, I will deviate a little bit from the SST documentation with this one because I might have not just the packages, I will also have app folder for web app and our dashboards. But I just like this kind of way of managing things. So I separate my packages from my apps. It's just what I prefer, and then you can also have your own doc section. But we'll go into more detail in a bit. All right. To get started, I'm just going to use a blank project here. So you can see I've got SST example, nothing in it. Great. All right, so let's just jump over to what shadcn is that I was mentioning before. So those who don't know, shadcn is a UI library based on React and TypeScript mainly, also JavaScript, but essentially it's got a lot of these components made for you, so you can just import into your project and start building straight away, which saves you a lot of time. You don't have to do it. They've got a lot of different examples here. They've got different blocks. They even have good charts, so you don't have to build everything from the get-go. You can use a lot of these components to accelerate your deployment. And they also have ties in very well to the V0 application, which I mentioned before, which helps you build up applications very quickly, or just MVPs very nicely. So there's a lot of advantages for using shadcn just in terms of a development standpoint, and a lot of the large language models actually have trained on shadcn, mainly Anthropic, so it just helps with development a lot quicker. So I highly recommend you use it, but we're going to be using it here. But to get started, we're going to start with the monorepo setup here. I've tried most of these. PNPM is probably the best one. It works with least issues. Essentially just come here, copy this command, and we'll go back to our project now. And in our project, we'll go to the terminal, and we'll literally just copy that command in and run it. And it'll actually start setting up a whole monorepo for us. This won't make it SST compatible from the get-go. We'll have to do a few things, but let's just run through it. So we're going to go Next.js monorepo. This is called this SST starter one as well, and it will start creating that Next.js monorepo for us. We'll wait about a minute or so, and it will spin everything up, and then we'll do a quick run dev just to see that it works. Great, cool. So we know it's running. Let's just do a PNPM store just to make sure it has anything. We need to go into this folder and let's have a look. Okay, we got our apps. We only got one app, which is the web, and we can see it has packages here. It's got ESM lint config, TypeScript config, and the UI. So we know it should just have one app. So let's just quickly install just to make sure everything's up. Cool. And we just go PNPM run dev. And this just starts the dev server locally, and we can just see how it looks. So we go, nice turbo monorepo for us. So we can just go to that and let's see what it looks like. And there we go. We can see it, hello world, and it's importing our UI button here. Pretty awesome. Cool. All right. So nothing too grand here. We're going to now move on to the SST documentation. Typed on what SST is before, but essentially, if you haven't known before, SST is pretty much was first built around serverless frameworks. They mainly started focusing on Lambdas. How do you quickly deploy Lambdas in your applications and manage that? But recently they've kind of broadened the scope. They also do containerization, so they help deploy different containers to Fargate, things like that. They also help with other providers like Cloudflare, is their main two ones, AWS and Cloudflare. But they do support over 150 others, providers here, and you can go read in the documentation how, to add them. SST is just a great resource of the high level to get your application, working quickly, especially on AWS or Cloudflare. In this example, we're going to stick to AWS. We'll touch Cloudflare on a different set of videos. But essentially, all right, just to get started, let's just do how it look. So we can see here, let's do the Next.js one. So you can see pretty much they're telling us to create our Next.js application, see into it, and then they want us to npm SST in it. We can actually do this in the Monorepo. It'll work 100%, which is great. And we can then run SST. But there is one caveat. You do need to have your AWS CLI configured to do that. So we'll go into a bit of depth what it is. But let's just do npx SST in it. So it'll just install SST into our packages. And if you guys have never worked with a Monorepo, you kind of want to keep the same package manager consistent across packages. You can, mix and match them, but you might run into issues. Just try to keep it quite standard. Again, here we're just going to say, I want to create an SST config. Yes, we want to use AWS. This is just installing the AWS provider. We won't be using Cloudflare in this example, but we will look at that in the future. All right. So it's just going to install, and we'll see it'll make this SST config file here, and also install into our packages and add it into our git ignore, which is great. And what's nice is this is pretty much all we need to get started with SST, and we'll jump into a bit more in a bit. All right. So there we go. We can see SST is installed. We can go to the config, and we can see it's named it after our folder, SST starter, and it's got a protection on our production environment, and it's showing our home as AWS. You can also put like a region here, but we're going to keep it quite simple. All right, so now we established our Monorepo. We've tested it around into dev. We actually want to test this, if we can deploy this to AWS. So first things first, if you haven't got an AWS account, just look for AWS console new account. Just go here, make new an account. It'll ask for your email, also ask for a credit card. You can go from there. So you'll access your root user, and then from your root user, you want to create an organization, and then you want to create your own independent account that you will use on a daily basis to actually use the SST configurations to deploy and destroy any environments on AWS. So we'll quickly look at what that looks like now. So step one, make an account, get your credit card in, and get everything sorted. Have a root access, and make your additional developer account that has administration purposes. You can also do this straight from the root and then make your user and switch. So for the purpose of this video, assume you've created your AWS account. You're in your root user right now, and you can go to your administration dashboard. Okay, realistically, if you've created your AWS account now, you should be on your console home. And one of the first things that I always recommend you do is you make an additional user account. So you'll just go to your IAM Identity Center and make a new account. So you go IAM Identity Center, you'll go to users, and you'll literally come here and you'll add additional users. And from that, you can then use that user instead of your root admin to always log in. One thing I highly recommend doing when starting is making AWS organizations. This is just great if you want prod and dev so you don't have to mix and match. So you can see here I've got a few different ones, but the process of just adding one is quite simple. If you want to add a new organization, you can literally just come here, click on root, and then create new organization. It'll take you to this detail screen. You enter a name, you're going to give it a tag if you want, and then just go create. The tricky part comes in when you've created your organization here. You want to add an AWS account. And for the first account, it's kind of easy. You just use the standard email that you signed up with. But what happens is if you want to add an email that you already have to the second, like a dev account, it won't allow you. So the way to get around that is use a plus between your email. So for example, if you've got your name at email.com, you will literally just add like a plus here and then just name it your environment plus dev. And it'll still send the email to you and you can use the same account. So that's just the workaround, just so you know. But all right, so you made your AWS account with your organizations. Why is this great? I'll show you in a bit. But essentially you do that, then go back to Identity Center again. Then from this, you'll make your new user according to accounts. You'll give it the permissions. Start with administration permissions for now. You can always reduce it after your first initialization, but you'll make your user account. So when you add an account, you'll add all the different details of it here. You'll put your username, your email, first name, etc., contact message, all the rest, and you'll add it to your groups. So that's just like your permissions, and then you add your user. Once you've made your user, you want to go to AWS accounts here just to see which accounts it has access to. These will be according to the accounts that you made previously in the organizations, so you can see if you can log into multiple of them. And if it's not there, just assign the account to the user. That makes it great. All right, so if you set up your AWS organization, your user account, assign the user account to the organizations you want to, you'll see this access portal. And this is very convenient because you can come here and you'll see all the different environments that you made. I am blurring these out on screen just for privacy's sake, so I don't have to delete all of this. But at least you should be able to do the same. And each one will have its own unique account number assigned to it. And you'll be using that for your SSO login. All right, so now that you've made your user, your organization, you assign the user to the different organizations with relevant permissions, and now next you want to use the AWS CLI. So first things first, just make sure you install AWS CLI. You can come find an AWS here. It's got different instructions how to do it, one for Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. Just follow the instructions, make sure it's installed. Essentially what you want to do now is you want to use the command AWS configure sso-session. I use different profiles, so for this one I'm just going to use profile test here, and what this is going to do, it's going to prompt me to make my SSS session ID with the profile test. So essentially you can think of this as like you could have your prod, your dev, and your QA session, and each can have its own SSO login, so you're never deploying to the wrong account. So I'm always going to use this profile to deploy the SST thing. So this example, this just used test. It's going to set up, what do I want to call the session name? I'm just going to call it test. This SSO start URL, where you can find this is if you go back to AWS, you go to the Identity Center again, you sign in, and you go to the IAM Identity Center, and you go to the dashboard. So the dashboard here, you'll see this AWS Access Portal URL. Just copy that, and then just go back to your thing, paste it. SSO region, you can do whatever. So if I look here, I'm on NVIDIA here, and we can see that's US East 1. So just again, you can just copy and paste that, ES1. this is the scope, the access of the scope of your user. So to find that, you can just go to your users, you can click on them, and then go to your AWS accounts and grab the account that it's for, and then the permissions that you've given it. In this case, I've given it the administration access. Again, a lot of this is blurred out just so nothing really goes long, but hopefully you can at least follow with your own example here. And you just go back to your access and just paste that. So, and then there we go. Cool. Now we can see our AWS CLI is started, but we want to sign in now, so we can actually start deploying to this. So we can just go AWS SSO login test. It's going to pop up here, and it's going to ask us, is this right? And we're going to confirm, and then we're going to we're going to allow access. Allow. Great. Now we've actually signed into our AWS SSO, which is great. Now we know we can deploy here. All right, so we're done with our AWS SSO configuration. Now what we need to do is we want to make our AWS config. And in this config, we can set out different profiles. So you remember those organizations I was talking about earlier that you can make different ones, your production, your dev, and your sandbox one? Well, now you can define your profiles here. Essentially, each profile can be related to the different organization. That will be using the account ID. But essentially, how you set this up is you want to go to your AWS config. I have this on screen, so I'm going to use Vim here. I just go Vim and then colon AWS config, and then when I enter there, I'll enter the details. And the profile looks like pretty much what I have on screen here. It's your profile name, in this case is test. Our SSO session, we also name test. And then your SSO account ID, again, remember that's the top right corner. You'll get that ID, copy it in here for each environment you want to use, or account I should say. And then your SSO role name, the region that you want it in, the output is JSON. You'll copy that into your AWS config, save, and everything should work. All right, back to our example. So we've got our normal dev server. If we do PM run dev, we'll see the same screen as before. I just want to do one little change, just say hello world SST, just so we can see that this is working. So we're just going to go PNPM run dev. Remember, this is after we installed SST on it, and I just want to make sure you guys can see how it works and the difference. So we go back, we can see pretty much still there. Great. All right, so we've set up our AWS CLI, and now we just want to make sure we can run our application on AWS now. But before we start, there's a few things I just want to add to this to make this Monorepo a little bit better and easier to manage as our application grows. So this is just something I'm going to do. So I'm just going to name our project here because it puts the shadcn Monorepo. I'm just going to call it SST starter. But what I am going to do, and this is very important to note, you'll see there's this at Workspace, and we kind of want to replace that everywhere with our Workspace name. So in this case, it's going to be at SST starter / depending on how you want to do it, but just do it like that. You can also just do it without, and it should be fine. So, and you just want to replace all. Perfect. You might want to reinstall everything after this, but essentially what's happened is it's just updated our dependencies to match our project. I just like this for making things a bit more consistent, so we can come here and see what our package name is, or in this case the app name is the web, and then we can see the different packages that it's importing from our workspace, and we can see where it comes from, and it's at SST. So this is just good practice to do. All right, so let's just make sure that is working before we continue, and I'm not lying to you guys. So let's just delete the log file. Let's try again. All right, so everything is working. Let's just double check the dev call. There we go. Let's see, did it work? It worked. Okay, this is, do you want change here? This just changed this hello world SST. Alright, perfect. Okay, so one thing I do like to do, I'd like to add this tsconfig.json, just helps with a bit of the Monorepo setup, helps with type safety, and you can import components a lot easier. So highly recommend doing it. You can probably just copy what's on screen. We're also going to add an infrastructure folder here. This is just another good tip to do. I want it in our project console. So this is add our new infra folder here, and then on here we can actually make our Next.js application. So in this we can actually just go to like SST, and we don't actually have to define everything in the console here. So when we just run async, we can just import it. Alright, so we're just going to import our export. This is make sure we're following the documentation, so we can all follow along. So you can see here, this is for a bucket, and this is the Next.js linking to the bucket. But we just care about the Next.js part. So we're going to go here, and we're just going to make the SST. But one thing to note, again, the biggest struggle with SST, as you can see on my screen, it's trying to give me SST version 2. Try not to let it do that. We've got SST.AWS Next.js, but we also just want to make sure we're putting the path. And in this case, it's just going to be the web. After path, you can put the domain. It is in the notes. So if you upload your DNS configuration to Route 53, you can put just domain, and you can start giving it subdomains, and SST will handle it for you. But we'll go into more detail in later videos. Alright, so now we've got our SST defined. We're not really importing it into our config yet. Alright, one thing I did forget to mention earlier, I like just to name my variables. So I came back and I renamed my Next.js, so I can export that and I can import that into my SST config, so then I can output certain variables from it. So essentially, we've got our Next.js application, and we're specifying the path, and we're literally just going to go to our SST config, and we're going to actually import it here in our session. So in this case, you're going to import it, specifying where it's coming from. In this case, it's Infra Next.js. And then from that, we can actually print out the URL, so we can actually see it when we're actually doing our SST dev and deployments. So it actually just pops out for us while we're doing it. So this is here how this works in action. We've defined our SST Next.js application. We've got our app, very basic app. We could always iterate on this, but that's not the point of this episode. It's just to show you how you deploy your SST and how you can work with it. So for this example, we're going to use SST dev, which is our own personal staging branch. So just how that works in a brief summary, it will only deploy the necessary changes it needs onto your AWS infrastructure to run. So that's stuff like your credentials, your IAM permissions, maybe the S3 buckets and some lambdas if it is needed. But all the dev environments that can run locally on your machine, it will try, depending on your setup. So you might just have to do a bit of reading. If not, we'll try to cover a bit more of that in future videos for each different use case. But in this one, mostly everything that's run locally. We don't really have anything external. We don't have any databases or anything like that we're setting up. So it's very low risk. So in our case, we're just doing AWS profile, and we're going to do the test one that we made up. And we're going to npx SST dev, and this is going to start SST for our personal branch. So again, it'll just deploy SST. What's nice is if I did make a change while I'm in dev mode, it will actually update the dev mode automatically. I don't have to rerun this. So it's a good thing to note. So it actually just helps. All right, so SST is deployed now. We can see we've got the URL down here. One thing to note, I did make a mistake. It has to be in an object. So you can see I made it return URL and then colon the Next.js .url. So it prints out quite nicely here. And you can see it's unavailable in dev mode because it's actually running on local. So if we go to my web, we can see it's running on port 3000. And if we go to functions, we can see it actually made a Lambda. So we can actually open this up. And if we just look at the web, we can see this URL here. And again, it actually doesn't exist because it's not available in dev mode. It's all running locally. Great. So this is all great that dev mode's running and we've got some IAM permissions and a bus event going to AWS. So it doesn't really make much sense in our current example here. If we did have a database on S3 bucket, this just makes it a lot easier. We don't have to import those environment variables each time. We just link them in, and SST will help us with the communication. So it just makes lives a lot easier. But say we want to actually see what actually have we deployed, we can actually go straight here and we can go and look at the resources. So this is the SST starter kit here we made, and I can just go in here, Darren Hine, and we can see what's actually been deployed. So there is a bucket that has been made to keep the SST. To see what's deployed, we can go to our SST console. If you have downloaded, follow the documentation. It's very simple. You can use your GitHub account to sign up, and then just tie it into your accounts that your AWS account. You'll just do a deployment service. It's quite easy. Just follow the documentation. So in this, we can go to Darren Hind, and we can see all the different resources we've deployed, and we can see there's very little that's happening here. But say we actually want to deploy this to production now. So like I said, SST dev is on my personal, but maybe I actually want to deploy this to my production. So now we just go SST deploy, and I go start stage name, and I can call this whatever. There's no predefined. It'll actually push that stage name, so you can have your dev, development, main, production, whatever you like, and you can just keep track of that and make sure you incorporate your CI/CD pipeline at a later stage. But essentially, I'm just going to go CI. I'll just call this one develop, just for the naming's sake. So what this is going to do is actually going to push everything up to AWS for the develop stage. You don't really want to do it for your personal stage because you want to use your personal stage for development purposes to test things locally as much as possible, and you're going to be constantly iterating on it. And if you do deploy on your personal stage and then you try to do some changes and run it locally, it breaks everything that is on AWS for local deployment. It's just not worth it. So just separate your stages. And then use your SST console just to see what has actually deployed in your AWS environment. One thing to note, everything is set by this name that you made in your SST config. So you can't have multiple projects with the same SST starter. It will clash. So just note that. I actually haven't tried it, but I assume it will because I've made a project in the past, deleted it, and I was like, oh, I need to delete everything from SST, and I just literally put the name in and I just said destroy, and it destroyed it. So I do think that that's pretty much how it works. So that's just one thing to note. And we can just wait for this to deploy, and our Next.js application will be deployed on AWS using SST. And we can see it was quite a straightforward process to do. It was a bit tedious just getting the CLI up and working, but once you're done, it's over. You don't need to do it again. So we can see that our deployment is done now. So we can just quickly have a quick look. We can see it deployed our Next.js application. It queued up our Lambda subscribers, our functions, all of this for us, which is great. If you didn't know SST actually uses OpenNext under the hood, shout out to the OpenNext guys for at least keeping up the. If you didn't know, SST actually uses OpenNext for the Next.js deployments. Big shout out to the OpenNext team that keep the open source library up to where it is. It just works perfectly. I've never had a problem. Really appreciate it, guys. And yeah, so we can see now everything's up. We've actually got this permanent link. We've got this web link, which is the CloudFront. So we can actually open this, and this should actually take us to a web page which just had that button. And technically, we've got our Next.js application running on AWS. We could add more functionality to it it would just use the lambdas to run the functionality. But what's really great is, say you're done, you didn't really want this, it's costing you too much, or it was a mistake to deployment. Well, it's actually super easy to get rid of. This is the other point I really love about infrastructure as code. I don't have to go through all these resources and destroy them on AWS console. I can literally come here, and instead of going deploy, I literally just type remove here, and it will remove the stage for me. Everything will be gone. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to pay for it. See, the delete happened now. It took a bit of time, but if you go back to that link again, we will see it is gone. So if we go back to that link that we had, we can see I haven't refreshed it yet, but if we refresh this, it no longer works because the app's no longer there and it's been deleted. And this is the one thing I really like about infrastructure as code. You can deploy things and destroy them very quickly, and it's very quick and manageable to do. And then with Git and versioning control, it just makes it so much easier to see what actually changed over time in your whole application. Hope you guys found this video useful. And this is just the tip of the iceberg with SST. I know this video is probably longer than it should be, but I did feel like it was important to at least break it down slowly for those probably new to it, to kind of experience what you should do, especially with the AWS CLI, because it can feel a bit tricky if you've never used AWS before. And hopefully I can do a Cloudflare one in the near future, but I'm going to start with AWS for now because it's the one I'm most familiar with, and we'll do a bit more videos like this to show different parts. We'll keep to AWS. We'll keep to AWS for now, and we'll just show different systems that we can deploy, and hopefully I'll be showing a product I actually want to make, and I'll be using SST to deploy all of that and showing that in future videos. But I really appreciate you guys' time. If you watched to the end, thank you so much.